Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blanks and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Play that music. Hello and welcome to another episode of the GSMC television podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC podcast network, and I'm your host, Howard Fletcher. And if you're new to the show, I'm glad you're here. Stick around for a bit. I've heard my take on television can be an acquired taste, so it may take a little time, but just like margaritas and tequila, I am confident that the more you ingest, the more you're going to start to like it. Now, you may regret it the next day, but you'll come back because you're going to remember how much fun you had. Yes! It's not a perfect analogy because sometimes on margaritas and tequila, you don't remember how much fun you had. If you've been with me before, I'd like to welcome you back. I'm really glad that you're tuning back in. I'm glad I've heard from some of you on my Twitter and also in email. Listen, if you want to speak to me, ever make any requests of me to talk about some shows, or if you have some feedback for me, you can email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com. You can also hit me on my Twitter, which is FletchDC, FletchherDC, or at GSMC_television. At the end of last week's show, I spoke with my friend Valerie in LA over a Zoom meeting. We discussed HBO's Outsider. I want to apologize for the sound on that because that technology, I'm still working the kinks out. But I do want to have conversations like that with some critics and some other friends of mine. And, it was just a little bit distorted. So I appreciate those of you who stuck with it. But why am I bringing that up? Well, one, for the apology. The other is because The Outsider blew up for HBO. The adaptation of the Stephen King novel really didn't receive much media attention. I mean, not like Watchmen or like Big Little Lies, which, you saw the stars of those shows all over the talk shows. There were a lot of commercials, a lot of promotion, especially on, obviously, HBO. And there was a lot of print about it and stuff on the internet. As far as The Outsider's concerned, it wasn't promoted a lot except for in the trades and, every so often on HBO. So it was good to see that it did so well. The Outsider is drawing the biggest audience for a first-year HBO drama since Westworld in 2016. And Westworld was big. It is big. It's about season 3 is about to start on Sunday. You all watch. Anyway, through its first 9 episodes, The Outsider, which stars Ben Mendelsohn and Cynthia Erivo, both of them are fantastic. As a detective and a private investigator, they are looking into the mysterious circumstances surrounding a boy's death. I'm not going to do a whole lot of spoilers here. I know Valerie and I spoiled everything, and I hope you weren't listening if you hadn't seen the show yet. Averaged about 9 million viewers across all platforms. So what that means is 9 million viewers per show throughout all platforms. That means watched it live, watched it in streaming, watched it in DVR, all of that. That is a great number. Now, Sunday's finale drew the biggest initial audience for the show with 1.37 million people tuning in live. That's when it came on at 10 p.m. on Sunday night. That doesn't include the people who tuned in when it was rerun again at probably 1 a.m. The following day. and the several times afterward. That number is a 16% improvement over the previous high of 1.18 million, which was set the week earlier. With replays, that's DVR, and streaming, Sunday's total for just one show, the first run, was 2.2 million. And that's a high for a first night show on HBO. That's fantastic. Now, the all-in figures for The Outsider are ahead of both the fall run of Watchmen, because that debuted last fall, of 7 million viewers. Now, remember, Outsider was 9 million viewers, which ran over a similar period of time, and the third season of True Detective, which averaged 8 million viewers, which ran in January and February, just like Outsider. The reason it's a better comparison is because, like True Detective, Outsider aired episodes that were opposite the Super Bowl and the Grammy Awards and the Oscars. And even with all that competition, they did 1 million more viewers than True Detective. Now, by True Detective 3, we hardcore True Detective viewers had grown a little jaded, had to stayed up there with the quality of the Matthew McConaughey, Woody Harrelson, Ruskin Cole version. Who knows? They may have probably, their numbers would have even gone higher than that. But I was glad to see, even with my sharp criticism of The Outsider, that it happened to pull off a good number. And I do recommend it for the acting. I will nitpick some of the plot points, especially the finale, to death, but I'm not going to do that now. The other thing I wanted to talk about with ratings is a show that I do not watch, but I certainly had fun with, The Bachelorette, which is premiering this week. Well, The Bachelor is in its finale, and the first half of the Bachelor finale on Monday, which at the time I'm recording this was yesterday, scored the show's best same-day ratings of the season, giving ABC a pretty big win among adults 18 to 49. Again, I am shocked. Well, shocked is a heavy word. I am always surprised that The Bachelor and The Bachelorette does so well, because it's not a show that I thought would be successful, but that sucker is a juggernaut. The show dominated NBC's The Voice in the key ad demographic of 18 to 49. And though the Voice led in total viewers, so I guess there's a whole bunch of little kids watching The Voice, and some older folks, you know, the money people, the 18 to 49, they were watching The Bachelor. The Bachelor's 2.1 rating among adults, 18 to 49, was up 10.5% over its previous season best of 1.9. So, as much as I can clown The Bachelor and I can clown The Bachelorette, but ABC is laughing all the way to the bank. And I'm obviously in the minority. The competition that night besides The Voice was The Good Doctor, which didn't do so well. Although it does, it'll get another season because it does well enough, from what I understand. The Voice, again, brought in the biggest total audience, though, of 8.66 million viewers. And that's down from 9 million last week. And that's because they were all watching The Bachelor. So this is what I want to know. And I wish this was a call-in show, but it's not. So I'm going to need you to send me an email at Podcast Howard and let me know what is the attraction of The Bachelor and why is the finale so big? I mean, it seems like the finales of these shows, The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, not only do they result in big viewing audiences, they are like meme-worthy. I'm confronted with, I know Bachelor and Bachelorette memes that are just funny on the face of it, but I never saw the show. So, maybe I'll give it a peek. I probably should. Especially started doing this podcast, I need to. I guess I'll try to tune in to the second half of the Bachelor finale. Because if the numbers for the first half were this big, the second half, I don't know. It must be, I wonder what the cliffhanger was for the first half. What's the cliffhanger for The Bachelor? What woman is he going to choose? Okay, wait a second. Here's my answer. All right? Those of you who watch know this. Monday's episode saw Bachelor Peter Weber readying to commit to finalist Hannah Ann Sluss after his frontrunner, Madison Pruitt, eliminated herself from the dating competition. Quote, "I was head over heels in love with Madison, and Madison's gone now. This is not how I thought it would go," he told the camera of Pruitt's decision to end their relationship. "When you have that heartbreak and lose something that means so much to you, it hurts. It's not like my feelings disappear. They're still here." Despite his heartbreak, Weber forged ahead with his relationship with Sluss after telling viewers and host Chris Harrison that he's in love with two people. The episode then ended on a cliffhanger as Weber and Sluss had their final date the night before he would presumably propose in Australia. But Sluss noticed that something was off. It's hard being so certain and so sure of someone and not getting that in return. "You seem not completely there like I am. I'm just at my breaking point, honestly," she told Weber before saying goodnight. I wish I could tell you how this is going to end, but I'll have to wait until tonight to find out. When I come back, I'm going to talk about Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, and coronavirus. I'll be right back.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Okay, I'm back. No breaking news on the Bachelor yet. I'll let you know what happened with Miss Sluss. That's an unfortunate. That's an unfortunate name. Now I said I was going to talk about Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, two game shows, been around forever. I'm a Jeopardy fan. Never been much for Wheel of Fortune. But Wheel of Fortune, I believe at one time, during the 90s maybe, it was like the number one game show on television. Wheel of Fortune is making big bank. Well, Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune are not going to tape in front of live audiences in the near term. And that's being reported by Variety because of the continued spread of coronavirus. They say it poses a risk to the guests, as well as the immunocompromised host of Jeopardy, Alex Trebek. Now, besides the fact that Alex is not the youngest guy in the world, I don't know his exact age. Let me look that up for you. But he fits the demographic of people who have to watch out about getting a coronavirus. He was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer as well. So his immune system is already compromised, besides his age. So, yeah, it's probably best that they do not let too many people into the studio or people they don't have to. Sony Pictures Television, they own both Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. And they are currently scheduled to tape episodes through mid-April on their lot, which is in Culver City, California. So, unless this thing clears up quickly, probably going to have a good number of shows on Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune without the studio audience. Now, Variety is reporting that the studio's cautiousness comes in response to several factors. And that includes Trebek's health, which I just mentioned. His condition puts him at greater risk of contracting the illness. The show's live audience, typically... Okay. The show's live audience typically tends to skew older, and it has a lot of out-of-town audience members, many of whom travel there because they're tourists. And I would go see Jeopardy. I would take offense to saying I skewed older, but I would go see Jeopardy if I could. I wouldn't go see Wheel of Fortune. But I imagine there aren't a whole lot of Culver City residents or even native Californians that are breaking their necks to go see game shows. ABC, NBC, and CBS thus far have not changed their talk show protocols. So you're not going to be seeing Seth Meyers, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, any of those folks, Samantha Bee, going without a live audience, at least for now. James Corden, there's just so many of them. They're not going to be going without studio audiences, and it's going to be difficult for them to do it because, they kind of play off the audience. It would be terrible to have a laugh track, don't you think? Now, in my past shows, last week's shows, I talked about all the cancellations that happened because of people pulling out of South by Southwest. The whole festival, the city of Austin ultimately canceled that whole festival, which was a killer because that's a big deal in Austin. Another huge festival that takes place overseas that's entertainment related. It's more of a cinema festival because it's called the Film Festival. It's a Cannes Film Festival that takes place in Cannes, France. Is hanging in the balance sort of right now because they don't know what's going to happen with this coronavirus thing. I'm bringing this up because even though this is a television podcast, as you all know, a lot of these films, especially at film festivals, because not all of these make it to the theater, end up on streaming services. And many of these are picked up and sold by producers and distribution companies who see them in these film festival settings. And if they are canceled, then they're going to have to go about getting them distributed and seen and sold another way. So it might put a hole in some of our viewing. It's among several events in France that are kind of hanging in the balance because of the coronavirus. The government of France recently banned gatherings that are more than 1,000 people, and Cannes is definitely more than 1,000 people. Well, why is this a story? Because it's not really a story yet because they haven't canceled. Well, here's why it's a story. In the event of a cancellation, the Cannes Film Festival is not going to be able to make an insurance claim. Now Cannes starts May 23rd, so we got a lot of time. But a lot of these events, especially the size of Cannes, I mean, I've been part of charity events that take on insurance policies because if they have to cancel for any reason that's out of their control, at least it won't come at a loss. Cannes was given an opportunity to buy insurance, as all of these events do, and I imagine an insurance provider would love to have Cannes, something of that size, as a client. Circle Group was the insurance company that usually covers Cannes, and they offered them what's called a buyback option to cover epidemics and pandemics that might end up in the canceling of it. And Cannes turned it down about 10 days ago. And according to a source at the Circle Group, it says that the company, and this Circle Group's big too. They're kind of like the, we don't recognize them too much because they don't do a lot of business over here. But they cover the Caesar Awards over there. The Caesar Awards are like the Oscars of France. So they cover all these award shows, so these big events. The buyback option represented about 6% of the total price of the insurance package. So this wasn't I'm sure the insurance package is hefty. They don't give the number here. But it wasn't like it doubled the price if they did this. And they turned it down. And because Cannes decided to turn down this option, it won't be covered if it has to cancel. Now, the budget of the film festival is said to be about $22 million. And that is, part of it's financed by the country of France. That's how big of a deal this is. As you know, I mean, you see it in the news. It's everyone's watching what's going to come out of Cannes. And so it's a big moneymaker for the country. And so definitely they put up some of the money for it. But they also have corporate sponsors. But anyway, it's $22 million that's up. Now, the organizers of Cannes that spoke to this reporter at Variety, they tell them that they're monitoring the situation and they are still pursuing a selection of movies that are going to be shown at the film festival. And they'll have a press conference on April 16th to reveal their movies, or hopefully not tell everyone that they're canceling.
What a sucker.
Cannes itself has not made a comment about this yet. This is all from a source that spoke to this Variety reporter. Like most other insurance companies in France, Circle Group doesn't cover cancellations due to coronavirus. They will cover other epidemics and pandemics, and they would have covered coronavirus had Circle Group or had Cannes bought this previously offered buyback option. But after the epidemic or pandemic, or after whatever listed disease that is covered by the policy passes a certain mark in the country of people who are infected, they will no longer cover it, and coronavirus has passed whatever that threshold is. In the case of coronavirus in general, insurance companies have stopped making these options available to clients since probably the end of January. Circle Group was going to make an exception because Cannes is such a big and prominent client. And, that was a big deal. But Cannes said, no, we'll pass. That's all right. So we will see what we will see. But, and I hope that it doesn't get so bad that they have to cancel. Really, that would be a good thing. But, man, that's a big risk. They just said, you know what, we'll pass. Well, I'll tell you who didn't pass. CBS, NBC, and ESPN Sports. Because they just signed this huge deal with the PGA Tour. So I'm going to talk about that when we get back. And I'll tell you why, much like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, I probably wouldn't have made this deal. I don't know if I'd signed a 9-year deal with The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. Obviously, I would have been wrong about that. This deal with the PGA Tour is big. I would have passed on it like the coronavirus rider. So maybe people at Cannes are smart. I think I'm smart. We'll talk about it when we get back. Stay with us.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
I'm back. Okay. I was just talking about insurance policies and the Cannes Film Festival and why they, well, I don't know why, but they're not carrying insurance and why it's good to have insurance. You never know what's going to happen financially. I'll tell you who doesn't really have to worry about financially stuff in the near future. Or even in the far-off future, at least for the next decade, and that is the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour, for those of you who don't know, it's the organizer of men's golf, the main professional men's golf tour here in the U.S. And they just struck a new 9-year deal with CBS Sports, NBC Sports, and with ESPN. Why should anyone care? Well, ultimately, it's going to raise the cost of bringing golf to U.S. fans. Now, it's going to give, theoretically, golf wider exposure. It's going to grow and get some new traction in the digital landscape with their new relationship with ESPN Plus. But it's probably going to eventually, like everything else, trickle down to the consumer. This new agreement, this pact, it grants TV rights to CBS and to NBC and digital rights to ESPN between 2022 and 2030. What this new agreement is signaling is the need, or the increasing need, for the top entertainment outlets to have live sports rights that they can control at a time when streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime are siphoning away audiences to watch this other scripted, recorded content. They are losing, they meaning the networks that broadcast sporting events, they're losing audience because people are binging Dexter. And when that happens, they can't charge as much for their ad time, and that's what brings their revenue to them. So they are going to have to do a stopgap or try to do something to make viewers pay to see these golf tournaments. Now, as somebody who doesn't golf, but was certainly glued to it when Tiger was at his best, I'm not a golf fanatic, but apparently they're of the opinion, and the numbers, I guess, back them up, is that people who watch the PGA Tour on television live will pay for the privilege of doing so, which is not surprising to me. I'm just surprised that they feel as though the number of people that will do this is large enough for them to have changed the terms. So let me go through some numbers. CBS and NBC, with their previous deal with the PGA Tour, was valued at around $400 million. According to people familiar with the deal, they always have to give that little caveat. PGA Tour officials are said to have negotiated an increase of about 70% for the next agreement, meaning the new cost would come at least six. Now, that past that old agreement, the $400 million, that was for, I think it was a 10-year deal. This added 9-year extension of the deal cost $680 million. Okay? That is, that's over $500 million for those of you who can't do the math. The cost of the digital rights increased notably, according to some of these people. The PGA Tour said it would not reveal the financial terms of this agreement because they probably made out like fat rats and don't want everyone to know. All right, this one I'm going to have to read to you. Under the terms of the new pact, Viacom CBS, and that's CBS Sports, and Comcast, who owns NBC Sports, will continue to show the FedEx Cup tournaments on broadcast TV. That's just the normal PGA Tour stuff. While NBC's Golf Channel will remain the league's cable partner, and the Golf Channel's out there now, and they put everything on there. Rights to the PGA Tour Live, a subscription video service that was being offered in part by NBC through NBC Sports Gold, will now migrate to Walt Disney's ESPN Plus, which will make available a wider range of content from 4 live channels. Okay, so you can get 4 live channels of sports. I'm assuming, not just golf, but sports. The PGA Tour also negotiated a new deal of similar length for the LPGA that keeps it on Golf Channel and gets more of its events on CBS and NBC. So whoever negotiated this deal for the PGA Tour can negotiate, because this is a sweet deal for them. And I just don't know who watches that much golf on television. I know people that are addicted to going to the range all the time. But wow, I don't know of anybody who's like, other than the majors, and even then they're not necessarily watching all players play all 18 holes of the Masters. Some people are, but not everybody, not that many people. So this is pretty significant, because if it's going to get to the point, now they're doing that with golf, and the money's this big, we all know the sports that people get together and watch and they have parties for. It's football. It's pro football and college football and college basketball and the NBA as well, although maybe not as much of a pull. And heaven forbid, not baseball. My Washington Nationals just won the World Series. Can you imagine if you have to pay extra to see all the games? That's like my summer. It's a luxury to be able to turn on the Nats games and just vegetate on the couch. So listen, you all keep your eye on this, because I'm not reporting. I've been reporting about coronavirus and how it may affect our viewing habits in the industry. I'm not doing that as an alarmist. I'm not doing that to be sensationalized sickness. That's the last thing I want to do. However, if in this new world that we may be approaching living in is going to involve us having to limit our contact with other people, meaning that going to sporting events on a large scale is going to start fading away, the only way that these owners of these teams are going to be able to collect revenue, because they're not going to be able to charge for concessions either, because we're going to be all at home watching the games, they're going to have to start charging for the games on our television sets. And so that season ticket price that you've been avoiding, I've been avoiding, because I much rather chill out at home and order pizza. Well, it might start to be an expense. So that's why I brought this up, because I feel my job is not only to talk to you about the actual shows that are on the tube and give you my opinion or tell you some other people's opinions about them, but I also want to be a resource to tell you about possible changes that are going to be coming down the pipe. And right now, politics aside, all of that, we seem to be coming into this period now where we might have to start changing our behavior, not immediately, not drastically, but incrementally. And there's always going to be some drop off. They could declare that this coronavirus thing is under control and not a threat tomorrow or next week. Let's just give it some time. Next week, next month. There are going to be some people, because of this situation, who are going to limit their social engagement for a good while, maybe for the foreseeable future, just because they are worried. It's just like, flying after 9/11, or when things happen and, people want to avoid putting themselves in a dangerous situation. So we know that professional sports and college sports are run by dollars. So the owners aren't taking any shorts. So if that stadium revenue and that concession revenue cannot get equaled out by advertising dollars, they're going to start making us pay to watch these games. And it wouldn't be the first time that there's been a discussion about football being played in like television studios with no audience, just, it'd be just high production value football or any professional sport. And that might be what we evolve into. But until then, I'm going to be enjoying my NFL Red Zone, checking out my NBA on TNT, and watching my college football and March Madness pretty much free of charge, or at least for the charge of my Verizon Fios account. And speaking of another group entertainment scenario that may change, AMC, the movie theater company, well, they're checking out streaming. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, I'm back. If you guys ever decide that you want to get into the podcast business too, check your mics before you start recording, so you make sure that what you said gets recorded. Because I just recorded this segment, and I'm sure it was probably the best segment I will ever record in life, but the mic was not hooked up correctly. So here we go again. I'll try to replicate it. You're going to say, wow, that doesn't sound so great, Howard, after you're finished hearing this. But anyway, at the end of the last segment, I said that this segment we were going to talk about the movie theater company AMC and the relationship that it's trying to forge with streaming services. And we'll get there. But since that time, which in my time was actually yesterday evening, now it's Thursday morning, and I'm recording this segment, there have been a lot of breaking news. So let's break it. Here it is. Last night, the NBA suspended its entire season. The league made the announcement last night, shortly after Utah Jazz player Rudy Gobert tested positive for the virus. It's unclear what the NBA's next step will be in Adam Silver, but no games for now. That's a big hole in the sports landscape. The NHL, in a statement they released yesterday, said that they are going to evaluate their options, which to me means they are going to probably follow suit. California Governor Gavin Newsom has just recommended the cancellation and postponement of gatherings of 250 people or more. So that would include sporting events of all kinds, even high school sporting events, movie premieres, concerts, and all that. He wants to postpone that. He's recommending he postpone this. This isn't like a martial law thing until the end of the month, until the end of March. Disney has scaled back its European premiere of Mulan, canceling the red carpet event and all of the stars and production people that were going to go over there for the premiere. It was going to be in London and Leicester Square.
Greetings.
Tonight, which is Thursday evening, would have been tonight. The only reason I'm bringing this up, well, I'm bringing it up because, number one, I'm hoping that I have some listeners over there in London and other places in Europe. Also, much of what happens, especially in England, of all places,
Greetings.
in Europe on the entertainment landscape, is going to mirror what we're going to do here. So if they are canceling big events over there, we're going to cancel them here and vice versa. That's why, South by Southwest was canceled. I would imagine that the Cannes Film Festival is going to be canceled any day now. Hulu announced the premiere of Little Fires Everywhere, and that's a streaming show that I mentioned in my show last week. Reese Witherspoon, Kerry Washington. Well, they canceled that premiere. It was scheduled to start today, Thursday. Now, that's a big cancellation. That's a show that got a lot of fanfare. I certainly was looking forward to seeing or watching it and seeing how it goes. Now, they are probably were going to rely on a lot of the promotion like Ellen DeGeneres and some of the nighttime talk shows to promote it. And they have canceled or stopped having live audiences for those shows. So that's probably one of the reasons why they decided just to hold off on it. They wanted to get the most bang for their buck. The Interactive Advertising Bureau strongly is recommending that as presenters at its annual New Fronts event, move to a streaming-only production. So they want to stream this awards show. It's not it's an advertising award show, interactive advertising, probably the equivalent of the Clio Award that Don Draper got in Mad Men, and it's because of coronavirus concerns. Now, YouTube's Brandcast, which is something that they're launching, and I'm going to explain it to you in a second, they pulled out. And when YouTube's Brandcast pulled out of this Advertising Bureau award show, they said, we're canceling it. Now, this is a press release that YouTube sent out, and I wanted to read it because this is what Brandcast is, which is kind of terrifying. YouTube creators are on the cutting edge of culture, creating entirely new genres, which we would never have imagined before, and diversifying our perspectives in the process. Most people say the content that they watch on YouTube is related to something that they are passionate about. And according to our joint research with Omnicon, relating to a passion is 3 times more important than whether or not a big Hollywood name is attached. In other words, Brandcast was going to make a presentation, and they still might through streaming since they've decided to go to a virtual setting, where they're going to tie more marketing and advertising into what people tune into on YouTube rather than getting some sort of celebrity spokesperson. That's what they're pitching to the people who get advertising. That if we tie in Coca-Cola with somebody's interest in the recap of the latest episode of Westworld, they're more likely to pay attention to Coca-Cola than having LeBron James with a Coca-Cola. So this is just more fine-tuned marketing, which actually I went to undergraduate school for. There's part of me that digs this. The other part of it just seems kind of terrifying. Pretty soon, all advertising is not going to be just tailored to your demographic, to your age group, to the region of the country or the region of the world you live in. It's going to be personally tailored to you and your habits and your viewing habits that have been tracked watching stuff online on YouTube. So, on one hand, you're going to have manufacturers and product makers who are going to be able to show you what you want to see. On the other hand, I don't know, you'll have no choice but to buy those products. I guess you'll be like Tom Cruise running in the subway in Minority Report. So why am I bringing this up? Not just because I feel it's my responsibility to bring you the latest in the television news and also just keep you up to date with current events or semi-current events, but AMC, as I said earlier, AMC Entertainment named this guy, Mark Pearson, as its chief strategy officer. And it's a newly created position that will include forging alliances with streaming services. Now, why is this interesting? It's interesting because for a long time, forever, streaming services and movie theaters have been at odds. Because, as you can imagine, theaters felt threatened by streaming services that they were going to keep people out of the theaters. Now, you have some hybrid stuff that's come up lately, like The Irishman, that was released on limited release in the theaters first before it appeared on Netflix. Well, AMC apparently has the foresight to see, and they're not the first. I mean, obviously Netflix saw this because they had an arrangement with Martin Scorsese. Well, they have the foresight to see that if you can't beat them, join them. And also, we might have an increased emphasis on what they're calling social distancing. You know, people are not, first thing, right now, you can't, in certain states or in certain areas, gather in large numbers because of people don't want this social spread of the virus. But even when this passes, and it will pass, people have gotten into the habit of just streaming at home anyway. And so the movie theaters are going to have to find some way to take movies that should be viewed on a big screen and work with streaming companies to probably do something closer to what Martin Scorsese did with The Irishman. Again, this is going to be more and more challenging as not only streaming services get better, but televisions get larger. See, at one time, you had to go to the movie theater in order to see a movie the correct way because they'd be shot in widescreen, and if it was on a television, you'd have to see it in what was called scan and pan. Now, with these television sets that are almost as wide as the wall of a rec room, you don't have to worry about that. So you can see Jaws the way Jaws was supposed to be seen. You know, and the reason I brought up Jaws is not just because I'm old, but with the advent of these larger screens, you know, these widescreen shot movies like Jaws have had a renaissance, a rebirth, because now you can sit in the comfort of your home and see the beauty that was meant to be seen. A lot of those shots in Jaws are simply spectacular out on the water, but that's lost when they had to cut it down to be able to fit on a conventional television screen. So we'll see where this quote-unquote partnership with AMC and the streaming services goes. But next, I'm going to keep my promise of last week. We are going to talk about The Bachelor Season Finale, Part 2, when we come back. Stay with us.
Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the backdoors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Okay, I am back. And I'm going to talk now about something I never thought I would, but I told you last week that I was going to fill you in on how The Bachelor season finale, part 2, ended. So I tried to write notes for the part. I didn't watch all of it, I'm going to confess. And I tried to write notes, but they were incoherent. So I went to the Hollywood Reporter, and I kind of, synthesized what they wrote. So if it sounds like I'm reading something, I am. That's my own little inserts, but here we go. This is what it says here. When the time is right, the Bachelor team will check in with Peter Weber. Now, Peter Weber was the guy who's the Bachelor, and Madison Pruitt. And Madison Pruitt was the contestant who was second to last. There were 2 women who were left, Hannah Sluss and Madison Pruitt. Madison Pruitt was the contestant who left the show in part 1 of the finale because she said that she couldn't marry Peter, that she wasn't ready to commit. And she didn't think he was ready to commit, so she left. Which left Peter really only one person left, and that's this Hannah Sluss woman. So he was, I guess, going to go forward with her. ABC's reality chief, Rob Mills, that's a title that you wouldn't have heard 20 years ago, tells The Hollywood Reporter that for anyone who tuned in to Tuesday's explosive live finale, it's easy to see why the pair would need to take a beat, meaning Peter Weber and Madison Pruitt. So apparently Madison Pruitt came back. I tuned out before that happened. We'll get to that. After promising an ending that no one would be able to spoil, Weber's 2-night finale indeed played out like a roller coaster of relationship saga. In short, Weber's frontrunner, Pruitt, Madison Pruitt that is, left the show, as I was just telling you, and Weber proposed to Hannah Ann Sluss when she was the only remaining contestant. Sluss accepted, only to have Weber break off their engagement 1 month later. Now, this is a month that I guess we didn't see on camera. This was when they went off and were supposed to have this type of honeymoon situation. Pruitt, realizing her unfinished feelings for Weber, then surprised the Bachelor star in Los Angeles 3 weeks ago, and the pair reunited again during Tuesday's live show to tell the world that they are in love. Okay, so it sounds like Madison made a desperation booty call to this guy Peter and found that Peter was alone because he dumped this Sluss woman. So they got it together again. And now they are in love.
Yes.
However, they stopped short of clarifying any sort of relationship status. So in other words, they're just hooking up, but they're not like a couple, leaving franchise viewers with a 3rd consecutive cycle to end not with an engagement. So apparently The Bachelor's had 3 straight seasons of not having an engagement at the end. How important is that to you viewers that watch The Bachelor? Please email me, podcasthoward@gmail.com, or tweet me at FletchDC, FletchDC, and let me know. How important is that? I happen to not think it's that important because all they show in the commercials are hot tubs and flowers. So I tend to believe that the prospect of these people having sex is what gets you to watch the show. But you tell me. The biggest bombshell came when Weber on live television tried to convince his disapproving parents, Barbara and Peter, that Pruitt is the right woman for him. Now, Mom and Dad have seen this before. They know, they've seen Madison's before, Madison Pruitt's, and they know all about the late night booty call to their son. Now, of course, in their mind, their son Peter is innocent. But we know that's probably not true either, since he went through a whole harem of women and decided, I'm not taking any of them. No. I'm going to assume, based off of the commercials again, and what I know about network television, that these women probably weren't the worst looking women in the world. In fact, I would imagine they were probably, if you want to use the number system, 8s and above. Plus, I'm sure a number of them were quite smart, which is probably the reason Peter rejected them. No. Maybe he couldn't hang with them. I don't know. Maybe that's what Mom and Dad know. But anyway, the Weber family drama unfolded live and ended worse than when things began, with Weber telling his vocal mother, Barbara, "I'm telling you that I love Madison, and that should be enough." Well, for Mom, Barbara, that wasn't enough. So apparently they had a big blow up that went viral on social media. I saw a couple of clips of that. And among Bachelor Nation on Twitter. Now, while one season ended with this big blow up at the end, and I guess Madison and Peter going off into the sunset to see if they can get it all together, another was going to begin, and that's this Bachelorette. So it ended with Chris Harrison to bring the next season's Bachelorette, Claire Crawley, and as they pointed out, and I promised I would, the 38-year-old, super old Claire Crawley onto the stage. So that was it for the Bachelor finale, part 2. I can't say that it was the best. Obviously, it wasn't my cup of tea because I didn't watch the whole thing. But, and from what I understand, it was kind of controversial in Bachelor Nation, as they say. But there's no doubt in my mind that they'll come on with another season and they'll get great ratings too. They always do. And speaking of ratings, last night on The Masked Singer, another show that I don't watch, Sarah Palin was on. Sarah Palin was on, and when they went off, now this is what I saw on social media, she busted out with some Sir Mix-a-Lot, Baby Got Back. Now come on, man. How many attention dollars do you need? Dude, I was flabbergasted seeing that. I didn't see it in real time, thank goodness, because I might not be here to do this show. I might have just, stroked out looking at that thing. Anyway, The Masked Singer led Wednesday's primetime ratings. I can't believe I'm saying that sentence. And adults 18 to 49 for total viewers, moving ahead of CBS's Survivor for the first time in a month. Now I watched Survivor like the first 2 or 3 seasons, which was probably before some of you were born. That's how long Survivor's been on TV. But I'm surprised it survived this long. But trust me, I would watch Survivor. I'm trying to think of the worst version of Survivor possible. I would watch, The Biggest Loser Survivor, or the Palin Family Survivor, or Survivor with Steve Harvey and David Spade, Cosplay Survivor, some crazy Survivor. I would watch hours of that before The Masked Singer. But The Masked Singer, people are either sick of Survivor or The Masked Singer is something I guess I'm missing out on. Now, I didn't miss out on the Sarah Palin thing, unfortunately. But I would like to see now if they had people on The Masked Singer like it was like somebody you would just never expect. Like if it was like Melania Trump, who unfortunately I think you would guess her probably. I've heard her speaking voice, so I don't think she'd be able to hide who she was. Or like Arnold, you could know he was singing. But I won't be so hard on The Bachelor at the end. The Bachelor, I will say this, if we're talking about ratings, that finale got the highest audience in 4 years for The Bachelor. And they got some of the highest ratings this year so far, although we're only like a fourth into the year, for ABC. It delivered 8.48 million viewers, which is a pretty darn good number. So The Bachelor's still killing it. Peter and Madison are in love. So it's all good for The Bachelor. And I'm glad I watched a little bit of it. And I'm glad it's going to come back for you guys to watch it. Next, I'm going to finish up by talking about, one of my favorite shows, Westworld, starts on Sunday. I'm going to go down through a lineup of the characters and tell you what you should be looking for. Don't go away.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
All right. Westworld. We're going to talk about Westworld. Season 3 starts this Sunday, which is going to be the 15th. And so it's a pretty, those of you who watch, they've had 2 seasons. The first season was way back in 2016, if you can believe that. And the other one, the last season, season 2, ended 21 months ago. So it's been a while between seasons and also a while since the whole thing started. So I'm going to go over the main characters a little bit. They're going to be spoilers in here. I'm not going to go into super detail, but there will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen the first 2 seasons of Westworld and you would like to go to it fresh without not knowing what's going on, which is the best way to watch it, then you should probably turn me off now and tune in to my next show next Tuesday, when I will be devoting the last segment of all my shows from now on to Westworld until the end of this season. Well, the first character I'm going to go over is pretty much the main character. There are 2 or 3 main characters, but the one we started out this whole journey with is Evan Rachel Wood's character, Dolores. Dolores is a host in Westworld. Some might call her a robot, but they've been getting updates and revisions ever since the park opened, so much of their body is like flesh. They're very human-like. And she attained sentience at the end of season 1. And season 2, she spent all of season 2 on a crusade against humanity. Many would say for good reason, because as a host, you're there to pleasure the guests in any way they would like, whether they be violent or perverted or worse. And Dolores, being the oldest host in the park, had gone through it all. And so many would say she had plenty of motive to go after humans. Teddy, who was her partner, pretty much, love interest, if you will, even though he was a robot too, played by James Marsden, he killed himself rather than participate any further in Dolores' rampage. He was like, I get it, but you're too much for me. Dolores ultimately escaped the park at the end of season 2, but she didn't escape in her body. She escaped in the body of Charlotte Hale. Charlotte Hale was a human, played by Tessa Thompson, but she ended up being made into a host. And they made a host that looked like Charlotte Hale. And Dolores left the park with a few assets, and they were actually 5 control units, which had the personality and abilities and all of those things. It's like the brain of 5 hosts. And so when Dolores left at the end of season 2, she had these 5 control units. Bernard, played by Jeffrey Wright, is also a host. He didn't know he was a host until the end of season 1. He was created by Robert Ford, who's played by Anthony Hopkins. I will get to him later. But Bernard was not down with Dolores' plan. You know, he identified with the humans for the most part. He was shocked to find out he was a host, but he wasn't down with the genocide of humans. So after watching Charlotte Hale kill Elsie was a human who worked with Bernard when Bernard worked for the park and when he thought he was human. He took on the job of just killing Charlotte Hale because he didn't like her and he liked Elsie. And he built that body, Charlotte Hale host body, for Dolores, and that's how Dolores snuck out of the park. For his troubles, Dolores killed Bernard, but she rebuilt him when she escaped from the park And the season ended with Bernard also going out into the world, looking like a human, but also being a host. Dolores told him that they will probably run into each other later on down the line and be in conflict, probably much like Professor X and Magneto. Okay, I talked about Charlotte Hale. Well, Bernard killed Charlotte Hale, but there's a twist to this now because Dolores left the park in Tessa Thompson's body. So when we see her later on, Dolores has built another body, or probably the Bernard host, built a body that looks like Evan Rachel Wood. So she has her unit back in the body that she's familiar with. But we also saw the Charlotte Hale body that she snuck out in alive with a control unit in it. We don't know what control unit it is. We don't know who that personality is inside of Charlotte Hale, Tessa Thompson. We're just going to have to find out this season. Ashley Stubbs, played by Luke Hemsworth. He was the security man, or actually the head of the security of Delos in that park in Westworld. We found out at the end of the season 2 that he too is a host. And according to the trailers I've seen, he'll still be around. What his role will be, we're not sure. Teddy, who I talked about before, James Morrison, he's a really good-natured guy. Loved Dolores, but Dolores deposited his consciousness in what they call the Valley Beyond, which is like a virtual paradise for hosts. And so that's where he is right now. We don't know if he's going to make a return, but his consciousness is still alive. And I have to believe that Dolores can access it if they do want to use Teddy in some regard later on in the show. In Teddy's absence, we're going to have Aaron Paul, I guess, as Dolores's male companion. She always seems like she likes to have a guy by her side. Aaron Paul's a human in this, from all I can see. And so I'm curious to see how that's going to go. Robert Ford, who is played by Anthony Hopkins, who is one of the best characters on the show. Every scene he's in, he steals. All of his lines are like poetry. They're really good. But he's dead. He was shot by Dolores at the end of season 1. Now, he made appearances in season 2 in the form of historical flashbacks where you had a CGI'd younger Anthony Hopkins playing Robert Ford. And also, he appeared in the consciousness of some other hosts, Bernard and Maeve and some others, because he was like a ghost in the machine. So even though Bernard supposedly erased him from the machine, if you watch Mr. Robot or know anything about computers, you probably have a little bit of Robert Ford still in the machine. And so we don't know if he'll show up or not, but I think the door is open for that to happen. And let's see, I guess last but not least, we're going to talk about the Man in Black. That is Ed Harris. Ed Harris has been almost everything in this show, and we don't know what he is. His character, William, or the Man in Black, as he's known for most of the series, has been everything from a naive visitor to the park to the ruthless owner of the park to a bloodthirsty gunman in the park to someone who appears to be a host at the end of season 2. There was a twist after credits scene where it looks like he is going through some sort of a loop, what they call a fidelity test, to see if he can become some sort of human robot or android hybrid, to see if his consciousness can live on in a synthetic body. So we're not sure what exactly he is. It looks like, because of the passage of time, that he's probably a host. But this show doesn't tell you a lot. You have to kind of figure it out. At least the first 2 seasons have been that way. And so from the looks of the environment he is in, it looks like a lot of time has passed, but maybe not. He might be totally human, but I doubt it because they said he's going through a fidelity test, which is the same thing that they put the other hosts through, and also Mr. Delos, but that's too long of a story for me to get into. I recommend you go to Man of Recaps on YouTube if you want to catch up. So that's about it for now. Like I said, next week, I'm going to go over in more detail episode 1. I'd like to thank you for listening to the GSMC Television Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Howard Fletcher. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. If you stayed with me the whole hour, thank you. If you didn't, let's try again next week. In the meanwhile, please email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com. Tweet me at FletchDC or at GSMC_television. I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to know who's listening to my show, what shows you watch, what shows you'd like me to talk about. And if you would, please go to iTunes, give us a rating, please subscribe. It helps us out. It keeps us going. Please, please, please do that. And also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.